apply anymore. It was done in 1941. We're going to see if all four of those presidents are even in today's top 10. Let's dive in. So my name is Mike. If I haven't met you before, welcome. And I'm a former teacher from Philadelphia of 3 years. And I am a political science major from the University of Delaware and just started a school community called Patriot History. So if you're interested in that, join. It is about U.S. presidents like we're going to talk about today. So who would be number 7? Because we're going to count down and see if you agree. And it's someone in my lifetime. I'm 53 years old. I was born in 1972 when Richard Nixon was president. But he's not on the list. Number 7, go ahead, give a guess. You can argue with me on this one. Ronald Reagan. Yes, the Gipper himself. From 1980 to 1988, or you could say January 20th of 1989. He was the greatest president of my lifetime. For various reasons. Number 1, he led to the Soviet Union collapsing. It wasn't just Mikhail Gorbachev like people want to say it was, okay? He bankrupted the USSR through his policies. Some presidents have events happen to them. Some presidents influence events. And the Soviet Union had been a thorn in the U.S.'s side. People were worried about World War III when Ronald Reagan still took office in 1981. I know that seems like ancient history now, but it wasn't then. And he had to deal with USSR prime ministers dying all the time, Chernenko, Andropov, and we finally got to Gorbachev. And what he did was he started the strategic SDI, the Strategic Defense Initiative, and people made fun of it. They called it Star Wars. He said, yeah, we'll have these missiles that can shoot nuclear weapons out of the sky. You know what? People made fun of it, but Gorbachev took it seriously because that was a deterrent if it could be made effective. And guess what? Although it wasn't done in his presidency, today there are Patriot missiles that shoot from the ground that knock missiles out of the sky every day. Just ask Israel and Ukraine, our allies there. They do it all the time. And he started that. Okay? And that was a big bargaining chip. He also put a lot of money into the military, and the USSR had to match it and even do more. And this really bankrupted. They spent so much on missile defense, on defense. They basically bankrupted themselves, the USSR. Yes, the Berlin Wall didn't fall till 1989, the year after he left office. But his policies led to it. And also, Afghanistan had been invaded by the USSR in 1980. And you can see a movie even called Charlie Wilson's War with Tom Hanks, where he helped fund the Mujahideen to fight against the Russians who had invaded and taken over Afghanistan. And it was their Vietnam. So he bled the Russians through his policies, Ronald Reagan. He also decreased taxes. And I don't want Democrats and Republicans to have an argument on this. JFK did too. This isn't remembered. JFK, along with Ronald Reagan, JFK put it down from the top part from 90 to 70%. Ronald Reagan put that down to 28%. Yes, for the rich. And it spurred economic growth. We had an economic boom in this country in the 1980s. The likes of, incredible proportions. And it led, he was the last president ever, and he was reelected with 49 states. He only lost Minnesota to Walter Mondale. Do you think that could happen today? Any president, any nominee winning 49 out of the 50 states today? I don't think that's even possible, but he did it. So Ronald Reagan, the number 7 president. Number 6, Woodrow Wilson. Yes, why do I say Woodrow Wilson? A lot of people call him controversial. He actually ran his 1916 campaign saying he would keep us out of World War One. But guess what? In 1917, and he was a two-term president, after the Lusitania sank, we declared war on Germany in April of 1917. That was a stalemate in World War One. Germany actually defeated the Russians. People don't remember this. People think, oh, the Russians always beat the Germans. No, they didn't. They lost in World War One, and they were going into France, and they were gaining territory. They were already on the Western Front. It was trench warfare, and they had to win the Germans before we got there. But we got there in 1918, and it was because of the United States that France and Great Britain could push the Germans back. We were now under Woodrow Wilson, and we were isolationists, and we would be isolationists again, but we became a world power, even greater than Great Britain at that point. So we changed the course of that war. Now, why don't I have him retire if we won World War One? Because, look, he imposed the Treaty of Versailles on Germany. He was part of that, and it led to Germany, who didn't think they lost the war. Germany wasn't actually invaded all the way to Berlin. People forget that. It was ended before we ever entered Germany. So a lot of the German people didn't think they lost, but they had to pay war reparations and all that, and they were told, oh, you were the cause of World War One, which is highly debatable about Germany being the cause of World War One. In any event, we did win, but indirectly, of course, that's going to lead to World War II, so I can't have Woodrow Wilson ranked any higher. In 1919, during his administration, though, women also got the right to vote. The 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Half of the population got the right to vote. So just because of that, even if he didn't personally push for it, that just expanded the franchise by half, right? So that changed the trajectory of U.S. history, simply women getting the right to vote, which, is incredibly important. So who's number 5? Who could top that? How about a one-term president, the only one-term president on our list, James K. Polk. This man ran saying he would only run for one term. And he promised to go from sea to shining sea. During his administration, we annexed Texas, but only went to the Nueces River. It didn't go all the way to the Rio Grande, and we wanted it all the way to the Rio Grande. He also wanted California. He promised to go all the way, like in America the Beautiful by Ray Charles, right? From sea to shining sea. And we put some troops farther out there to get the Mexicans to attack. And we declared war. Not only did we get the rest of Texas to the Rio Grande, he said, I'm going all the way to California. And he did. And we won that war. We beat the Mexicans. We got so much territory. New Mexico, Arizona, California, parts of Colorado, parts of Utah. All in 2 years. This war wasn't even close. People were thinking, oh, we should just take over all of Mexico. Well, we weren't going to do that. He also got the Oregon Territory. People forget this. He doubled the size of the United States, not just with the Mexican-American War. So we went all the way, and that went on the 48th parallel there, which is today's U.S.-Canadian border, all the way again to the Pacific. And this was incredible. It really was incredible how he expanded. This was manifest destiny. This was expanding the United States. Okay? And Britain wasn't happy about it, but they had to agree in the end. And he did it without a war with Britain. So that was important. So who was our number 4 president? Well, the writer of the Declaration of Independence himself, Thomas Jefferson. Come on. He was our third president. He bought Louisiana, but not just Louisiana. It was the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, and a deal he made with Napoleon because Napoleon had trouble. People don't know about this. In a war with Haiti. So they were basically, it was like France's Vietnam, and they wanted out of there. Napoleon wanted to take over Europe anyway, and he, well, did for a long time. So he sold us Louisiana for like Louisiana Purchase all the way up. I mean, double the size of the United States for like $15 million. Believe that or not. I don't care if it's an 1803 money. That was maybe the best purchase ever by a U.S. president. So for that alone, Thomas Jefferson is the number for, yes, president, because he made that deal with Napoleon for the Louisiana Purchase. I don't even need to mention anything else. I will say, because there are some in my school community, that in 1981, when he won the election against John Adams, and there was another person there, see if you can remember that, who he had to actually win in the House of Representatives for. But I'll let you put that in the comments below, who he actually beat. It was the first peaceful transfer of power from the Federalists and their party to the Jeffersonian Democrats. So it wasn't the Democrats of today, but it was a different party, and it was the peaceful transfer of power. So you got to give John Adams some credit for that. So number 3, who is it? You want to guess? It was someone who had to deal with the Great Depression. Yeah, it was FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Now, why does he? Because I don't believe he solved the Great Depression. Yes, I know he put in all those public works projects and such, but we still had 17% unemployment in 1937. He took over in 1933, saying the only thing we don't have to fear is fear itself. Well, guess what? It was basically only men working back then. A lot of women didn't work. People don't remember this. When we had 25% unemployment, that affected so many families, much more than even 25% would affect now, because a lot of women weren't in the workforce back then. So the thing that got us out of the Great Depression really was World War II. So you're going to say, well, why does he deserve to be in it? Well, this man did something else, which I think makes him extremely controversial. He is the only president to ever run for more than 2 terms and win. He won 4 elections. He was president, you could say, in 4 terms, even though he died in the last one. Which you could say, well, was he a king? Well, you can debate that. Anyway, we got into World War II and we stopped being isolationists even before World War II with Japan attacking Pearl Harbor. He started the Lend-Lease Act with the British and Winston Churchill. So we were sending them money and weapons before we ever got in the war. We were supporting them. But they couldn't have defeated Hitler. Hitler had taken over France. He had thrown the British out of France. Okay. So Hitler was actually doing very well back then. I mean, by 1941, yes, he was having problems with Russia, but he was in there with the USSR. He had taken over almost all of Europe. And he got us in, FDR, he had to get us in, to World War II because the Japanese did attack Pearl Harbor. And he didn't start that. I don't care if we had a oil embargo against Japan. Japan decided to attack the United States. Yes, Hawaii wasn't a state yet in 1941. It would be in 1959 or 1960. It would become a state, the 50th state. But it was a territory, and we owned it, and we had a base there. And so the next day, he's the one who declared this December 7th, 1941, a day that will live in infamy. And he used that word. Okay, it was a psychological term. We were going to defeat the Japanese all the way to complete surrender. This wasn't going to be a war like World War One, where we weren't going all the way in. And we also declared war on Adolf Hitler the next day, because Adolf Hitler, within 1 or 2 days, and Mussolini in Italy declared war on the United States, because they were in a deal with Japan that if one of them got into war with the United States, they all would, which was a mistake by Adolf Hitler, by the way, because then we declared war on Germany and Italy, and they would live to regret that. And during FDR's term, we did defeat Adolf Hitler. We were still hadn't defeated the Japanese as of that time, but he started the Manhattan Project. And that led to the only 2 nuclear weapons ever used in history at Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan. But that would be under Harry Truman. But if you defeat Adolf Hitler, in my book, you're number 3. He also started Social Security. He started the social safety net. I mean, so much of our economy, even today, all these years later, was started, that safety net, because of FDR. Yes, he was a Democrat, but Republicans like it too. Social Security is never touched. It's considered the third rail. You don't touch Social Security. So he started that, and it takes up a big part of our economy every year, our budget. And more people are retiring every year, so it has effects beyond his administration to this day. Number 2, can you guess? Our first president, George Washington. He started the precedent, our first commander-in-chief in 1789 to 1797, of having just 2 terms. He left voluntarily. He didn't theoretically have to. It wasn't written in the Constitution back then. But he left voluntarily, and that precedent was kept by every president until FDR. And after FDR, it was put as an amendment to the Constitution that you couldn't be elected more than twice. And that was because of George Washington. He wouldn't become king. He did respect Congress. And he, especially even in his farewell address, said he was big on staying out of foreign wars. He said, stay out of those foreign entanglements as much as possible. So he stayed. He tried to keep the U.S. military, because it was very, very small back then, just in the United States. What else about George Washington? Well, he was the only president elected unanimously. Remember, Ronald Reagan was 49 out of 50 states, but all 13 colonies, by then 13 states, elected George Washington. John Adams knew that. George Washington had won the Revolutionary War as the commander-in-chief of the army. So he was going to be elected. He was a hero. He's one of the most influential people of all time, let alone of United States history. So there's George Washington. So who's the number 1 president? Can you guess it? Abraham Lincoln. Yes, Abraham Lincoln. Why not George Washington? Why Abraham Lincoln? Because George Washington didn't have to fight a civil war. He didn't have to fight a civil war, with half of the United States being against the other half. And people are going to say, well, what did Abraham Lincoln free the slaves? Well, yes, he did. 4 million slaves were freed under his administration because of the Civil War. Now, that's not why he fought the Civil War. He fought the Civil War to preserve the Union, but he said that, and this is why the South seceded, why all those states left in the South, because they did have slavery, that all the territory we had gained in the Mexican-American War all the way to California, and in the North, those states were going to be free anyway, would all be free states, and the South would be a permanent minority in the Senate. So they, in the end, wouldn't be able to control anything politically in the United States, really. It was going to be less and less and less influence. So they left. So they would have a slave, you could say, economy. They were very agricultural still in the 1850s, going into 1860 and 1861. Yeah, cotton was their big export, which the cotton gin helped with. And the North was much more industrialized. But Abraham Lincoln was not going to allow the South to secede. And a lot of people say, well, isn't that states' rights? Doesn't any state just have the right to secede? Well, yeah, if you can, right? Abraham Lincoln wasn't going to allow it, and he was going to fight a war to preserve the Union at any cost, even 400,000 Northerners. And he said to the South, look, you can come right back in. I won't get rid of slavery in your area. But they wouldn't. And he thought it would be a quick war. It was anything but a quick war. And we were not doing well at first, those first 2 years at all. As a matter of fact, we had lost so many battles, you could say. Yeah, we won a lot too. But it wasn't until after Antietam that we could claim something resembling a victory, because they invaded Maryland, Robert E. Lee, that we could claim was a victory, that he put in the Emancipation Proclamation saying all slaves, and it wasn't in the entire Union, not in the in-between states. It was the slave states where they had seceded that would be free, but they weren't freed until the army was in there winning the wars and they were freed. So it took 4 long years to win that war. And a lot of blood of Northerners, yes, white Northerners, to in the end free all of the slaves, and there would no longer be slavery in the United States. And he proposed that there would be the 13th Amendment because you needed that in the Constitution, that all citizens, and this was birthright citizenship, were from you were free. It wasn't initially for foreign people, it was for the slaves. That's why it was passed. But in any event, we did win the Civil War. The Union was preserved, and that would change the course of history until today. This is Local History with Mike, and remember, that's local history to me, my country. What's your local history? Leave a like, please subscribe, leave your comments below, and remember, the Skool community is open, so please join. It's called Patriot History.